Welcome to Working Progress. This is the podcast where we dive into strategies for success and journey towards progress. Today, we're talking about the power of emotional intelligence, EQ, not just as a buzzword, but as a practical tool for improvement in leadership, team dynamics, and personal relationships. Joining us today is Dr. Kevin Gazzara, Senior Partner at Magna Leadership Solutions. He is a certified positive intelligence coach and an ICF accredited executive coach. In our conversation, we will explore how EQ assessments can build self-awareness and, more importantly, how to turn that awareness into action. We will cover topics like managing emotions under pressure, building trust through EQ, and what practical steps you can take to keep developing your emotional intelligence over time. So let's get started. Dr. Kevin, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's great to be back at TTI once again.
Yes. So let's kick it off. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you're doing today?
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in the East Coast in Philadelphia area, did my undergrad in engineering, did my MBA and then in business, and then went off and did all my doctoral work in organizational leadership. And that's really been my passion. And then I basically took that and spent almost 30 years in industry. I worked for Transamerica Corporation, but I spent my last 18 years working for Intel. And Intel was a fantastic place to work. I started as a product manager and as a project manager, I was a GM for a while, but ultimately moved into managing Intel's management and leadership development programs for the last 6 years that I was there. But I had a personal goal that I wanted to retire at 50, and I was able to do that.
That's a good job. Congrats.
It was awesome. And I give a lot of that thanks to my coach and mentor from Intel, as well as having a great financial advisor. So that you could leave the corporate world and start your own company. So in 2007, I left Intel, took two of my colleagues with me, Dr. Ali Lakhani and Marlene Lundy, and we started Magna Leadership Solutions. My goal was really to kind of give back, to go work with small to medium-sized companies that didn't have $10 million budgets, And when I was at Intel, we were doing the programs I was running, which were the first and midline manager programs. We used to do 2,500 managers and leaders a year in 10 different countries.
Wow.
And when I left Intel, we had just finished training our 40,000th manager. So I got pretty good at that. And I thought,
yes,
this really should be given to organizations that, don't have that kind of budget to spend. So and in addition to that, just to keep things fresh, I've been a professor at 6 universities. Wow. So I like to manage or kind of merge the academics with the practical side. I'm much more of a practical person. I like to have the foundational piece rather than just saying, hey, this is a good idea or this is my idea. I really want to base everything around the research, kind of like what, the way TTI approaches its assessments.
Yes. So can you tell me what sparked your interest in emotional intelligence and how has that really played a journey through your role? I mean, this big career at Intel and then deciding to go off on your own. How has that played into it?
It really started back in 2000 because as I was doing my doctoral research was focused around motivation and engagement. And you really can't dive into that motivation and engagement without studying emotional intelligence. So I did a lot of reading and research, based on some of the work with Daniel Goleman and Howard Gardner and a lot of the other kind of foundational people that established emotional intelligence. And that's kind of where I recognized the true value of it. And it was, I was always, fascinated by the people that had a deeper understanding of EQ and how they interacted. And I noticed particularly when I was at Intel before I left, the managers that really had a strong EQ value, whether you measure them or not, you could tell because of how they interacted with other people, that they seemed to have a really competitive edge, which kind of drove me into kind of trying to understand the science of the why behind that.
So with emotional intelligence, everybody has their own definition of it. What does EQ mean to you, and why is it so important?
Well, I mean, if you look at EQ, there's really there's three elements, right? That it's kind of your self-awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an awareness of who you are, what drives you, how your emotions affect you? So you have to have that self-awareness first, and then you have to be able to. Once you have that, you have to be able to regulate that, and you have to regulate yourself as well as with others. And if you can have that regulation, kind of taking that pause when necessary, going deeper, answering the right questions or having the right questions to ask, and then really understanding what motivates you, which is where the other TTI assessments really play incredibly well with EQ. To understand the motivation. If you can do that, you have those three elements of the self-awareness, the regulation, and the motivation, you can pretty much conquer the world.
Yes. Well, you mentioned the assessments. So when you're using the assessments, how can someone use that to become more aware? So at TTI, we have the emotional intelligence assessment, as you were mentioning. It helps you understand yourself, understand others, and then that deeper motivation, that grit is what we sometimes call it here. So why is that awareness such a critical first step?
Well, if I have to go to like a very famous philosopher to start out, he once said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll probably end up somewhere else. And that was Yogi Berra, a great philosopher. So, and I think that's really the foundation, that you have to be able to kind of understand yourself first, and we have something called our Leading Forward Academy, and it's a 6-month leadership program that we've delivered to dozens and dozens of organizations around the world very, very successfully. And we have a 3-step model. And the first is know thyself, which is really the foundational piece of EQ. And then it's understanding others, which is the second kind of tributary of that. And the third is to really be a leader, you have to initiate and sustain change, right? Okay. You can't do just the first two. You can't be aware and kind of regulate or work with others without getting results. And this ends up turning into, what I would call a reinforcing cycle. And if you can do that, then you can be wildly successful.
Yes. So you mentioned the program that you have. So what strategies do you use personally or recommend when managing emotions in high stress or very challenging situations? Because as we know, our emotions can kind of get the best of us. So what would you recommend for some?
Well, I think one of the first things that, we've done is, particularly when I'm working with executives or coaching executives, is that you have to start out with really getting a deeper understanding of who you are as a person, who the other person is as a person, And the nice thing is EQ provides you kind of what you need to be doing and what you'll be able to focusing on. And then we match that with DISC, which is DISC really describes how you should be doing it behaviorally. And then the third element is around driving forces, which is the why, right? So it's if you look at it from an iceberg model, it's what's under the surface, right? Yes. And then the fourth assessment that we use is the TQ, or the task quotient assessment. Okay. And that basically tells you when you need to be doing all these things. So if you have the kind of the what, when, and how, having all of those together really gives you a good snapshot of really coaching an individual, and not just telling them what to do, giving them a deeper understanding of what they they have to do. And once they have the reason why,
Yeah.
it makes it a whole lot easier to coach them than just saying, here's what you need to do. A good coach is really going to kind of pull from within inside the other individual rather than, just giving them a checklist of the 5 things they need to do to get better.
Yes, you even said it. It's about that self-awareness. So what is the reaction when you give an executive that report? What do they think of all the different sciences and really getting a snapshot of, wow, this is really me?
Well, I think it depends on the executive.
Okay.
The executive comes in with a high EQ. Generally, they'll take the report with the way it's intended. The report or reports. We use trimetrics. We use Success Insights. We use TQ. We use EQ. We use all of those, and it depends on the individual.
Okay.
And if they come in with a very high EQ and a really good understanding, they take the reports as it is. When you're working with executives that are a little bit on the cusp, on the edge, where it's more of being voluntold that you need a coach rather than really wanting a coach. Generally, what we have to do is we have to trickle out the reports just a little bit at a time.
Okay.
And one of the ways that we do is we'll probably either use EQ first or the DISC, right, to get them to understand. Typically, EQ is a little bit better to use in that situation, and then you bring in the other reports as needed. And if you can do that, generally they'll take the reports as they're intended, which are to be helpful rather. Because, naturally everybody's going to gravitate to like, oh my God, I can't believe it said this one thing about me in the 50 items that it mentioned, and there's one bad thing in there, and I don't like that, and they just perseverate on that. So the key is you have to kind of know your audience and then target the approach to the audience.
Yes. So would you say that the EQ results then really help enhance the communication and help them connect with others a little bit better once they go through it?
I would say absolutely. I think one of the things that EQ does is it provides you, several variables to figure out where your baseline needs to be. If you're in an executive position where you're constantly dealing with people and establishing teams and trying to motivate individuals and move forward and so forth, you have to have a high EQ pretty much across all the dimensions. If you're an executive and basically you're running an IT organization and you're doing much more of the bits and bytes, some of the scores can be lower, and that's okay. The thing is to figure out, not necessarily just go after the lowest score. You want to figure out which ones have the biggest effect on you being successful and the organization being successful. And then if you can focus on those, you get a much better result. But the key is you have to figure out where the baseline is. And if everybody's trying to get all their scores to 100, you're never going to get any of the scores to 100 just because you're trying to work on too many things. So you have to really pinpoint, is it the self-awareness? Is it the regulation? Is it the motivation? Is it, the organizational or the social awareness, working with others? You need to identify that. And if you see one that's, there may be one that's just a little bit lower than another, but the other one is more important. You want to work on that one first.
Okay. Have you ever had results that have completely shocked you based off of working with somebody and then you got their results and went, oh my goodness?
Well, I'd say I have one just incredible success story or case study. And it happened with an IT manager or a chief technology officer now. And he actually posted this on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago. So I had been coaching Ian for several years. Fantastic guy to coach, high EQ, good self-awareness, recognized, and just a sponge, recognized what he needed to do. And he was working for a smaller company, had a staff of 80, or he had 80 people in his organization. And then he got an opportunity while I was still coaching him to move to manage 400 people in a new company, bigger, much bigger
It's a
company.
big jump.
Gigantic jump. So when he moved over, because I had put him through EQ, and then also, I'm also a positive intelligence coach as well. I got certified to do that about 4 years ago, and I had put Ian not only through EQ with the TTI assessments, but I put him through the positive intelligence program. And essentially, positive intelligence is just an operating system that sits on top of EQ.
Okay.
And the two assessments or the two approaches work incredibly well together.
Okay.
And EQ provides you great descriptive methodologies of getting better. And what PQ does is it basically provides you information that's more prescriptive.
Okay.
So if you're a prescriptive person, you like to have something that runs on an app and it gives you recommendations, PQ is great. If you're more of a descriptive person, then the TTI assessments and the recommendations in there work great, but they work great together. And once Ian had gone through this, when he was working with the 80 people, he had recognized how it was a significant change for him by focusing on his emotional intelligence, and not only to his staff, but also to his family. So he actually went on LinkedIn, did this incredible article didn't tell me he was going to do that. And he said, hey, I posted this kind of all these accolades of how this has helped. And he said, hey, I'm moving into this organization. We have 400 people, and basically I've been tasked to do significant downsizing, like by hundreds of people.
Oh, wow.
And he said, what I recognized is I need to have all my managers ready for this.
Yes.
And he said, I want them I want to raise all of their emotional intelligence. So I work with 125 of the managers.
Wow.
We put them through the program focusing around EQ. The transition as they've done the downsizing has gone incredibly well. And I think the one thing, you talk about results and the importance of really measuring things, that one of the things, I'm not going to give you the exact numbers, so I'm not sure I can release them, but they have, I think, 9 different of the staff that reports to the execs. All of them, they did organizational health surveys. I think they do them yearly.
Okay.
And on a 0 to 100 scale, all of the other 8 organizations were floating around one number, and then Ian's, after we had done all of the training, in an organization that is downsizing, had points. His points were almost 30 to 40 points better.
Wow.
Than all the other organizations.
That's a significant,
right? So if you look at behavioral science, behavioral science says 4 to 6%. If you can get 4 to 6% differential, but be able to get 30 to 40% was just astronomical. And he really says, having my managers emotionally prepared, emotionally aware, being able to react, being able to know when to pause, when to listen harder, when to pull information out, to understand more deeply rather than telling them. Just having that awareness and practicing that over time, so that it really becomes who they are as a manager.
Yeah.
That's what he attests made the difference in the scores.
Wow. So EQ in this example, especially for leaders, managers, it really did help, that conflict resolution or that team development, dealing with very difficult situations. EQ plays a lot in that.
Oh, it's foundational. You have to be able to do that. And if you look at if your organizations that are healthy and growing, you would expect to have really high engagement scores. Ones that are continually cutting, and cutting back, and it was much more of a consolidation more than anything else around all the programs that they're doing, kind of bringing it more to a continuous, singular program rather than the way they had been doing it before he got there, which were like many, many individual silos.
Yeah.
Having that ability to bring those together
Okay.
is you have to have an awareness and be able to kind of self-regulate as well as work with the others to do that in order to be successful, to build those teams and build that trust.
Absolutely. So what do you think that link between EQ and building trust is? Where does that come into play, especially in organizations?
Well, if you can communicate with others,
Mm-hmm.
you can truly listen. And I when we do our leadership program, I tell people, the way you can tell if you're really listening is if you're formulating your response as you're hearing the other person,
Yes.
then you're not listening.
Yep.
Right. And so one of the things that we try to teach the leaders is make sure that you are listening. And if for some reason you start formulating a response, take a pause.
Okay.
And ask some questions of the other person so that it becomes more of a dialogue than two individual monologues. Okay. And that'll help your listening. And if people that work for you feel like you're truly listening, you don't have to do everything that they say, mm-hmm. and you can respond of how you're interpreting that.
Yep.
Generally, that's how trust is built. So you have to build trust through the communications, through the interaction, through the social development.
Yeah.
And then also to build trust, you have to be able to demonstrate competence.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. You
yes,
can't be
yes.
incompetent and just be a nice person dealing with the other people.
No. So really, you're listening to somebody, but do they really feel heard?
Well, and do they feel heard, and do they feel like you're really trying to understand at a level where you can have the conversation where you're not just pushing your own agenda?
Absolutely. So what are some of the obstacles that people face when they're trying to grow their emotional intelligence?
Well, I think the first thing is particularly here in the U.S., we live on what I would call the Wall Street model.
Okay.
Right? The Wall Street model is like everything is in the 30 or 90-day windows. And
yep.
And the biggest challenge really to develop the new neural pathways in your brain is what you need for emotional intelligence is that you have to be able to kind of have faith, and you also have to be able to kind of understand that it's not going to be cause and effect, right? So the Wall Street model says, if I put an hour in here, I'm going to get this advantage for my emotional intelligence there. And the thing is it's much more of an investment, kind of like going to the gym. You're not going to see that physical change immediately. So the biggest thing is that in order to build your emotional intelligence, you have to develop habits. You have to do reflection. You have to do mindfulness activities, which kind of being in the moment. Sometimes people do meditation also is going to help there. And the key is how do I get my mind cleared in a way that it really builds those neural pathways. So at the time when you need your high EQ, that it's available to you. But most people are not patient.
Yeah.
And that's the reason that you need a mentor or a colleague or a coach or someone to really help you hold yourself accountable. Okay. Kind of like what I did with Ian and so forth is setting up a program, holding them accountable, having them report back of what's working. And, what I would say where people are going to tell whether it's working, one of the big pushbacks you get is I've tried this meditation or mindfulness crap and it just doesn't work for me. And, I don't see any value for that. And the first thing is you need an extended period of time. A lot of people say you need 21 days to build a habit. If you look at the science, it's more like about 61 to 67 days.
Okay.
Right. And it's about consistency that you have to just doing 10-second bursts or 30 seconds bursts of taking that pause, taking some good deep breaths, and allowing to reflect before you react.
Okay.
Is really the thing that's going to help build those neural pathways. And if you can do that, the way you're going to be able to tell people, say, well, how am I going to know whether this is working? I've done this, 12 hours of this, and I don't see any difference. And there's really two ways to figure out whether it's working or not.
Okay.
And most people don't recognize that. The first way is to think about, or particularly if you can document, it's even better, is if you have a really negative event happening, how long does it take you to recover?
Okay.
Before I started my heavy duty emotional and positive intelligence studies, if I'd have something really bad happen with a client or whatever, the recovery time where I was just constantly thinking about woulda, coulda, shoulda,
Yeah.
was much, much longer. And over time, what I've recognized is that if I can really, really focus on just that for a few minutes, maybe 10 or 15 instead of 2 or 3 hours, and then move on, that's where you notice it. So you look at two things. The first is you look at the kind of duration of the negative event and how long your brain is stuck to it.
Okay.
And then the second thing is you look at how the severity of how you react to that event.
Okay.
Do you go completely crazy and off the rails, or is it like, oh, that's a big hit, I'm not happy about this, right? So if you can focus on those two, and if you notice a difference, you'll generally, if you keep up, you have the faith and you keep the regular activities where you're practicing this in the moments when necessary. You don't have to go off and sit on your back patio for 90 minutes every morning and hum mantras or whatever. I mean, not that that's bad.
No.
You don't, but it's really not about doing that. It's about taking the pauses and making those work for you.
Okay. Well, that kind of leads into my last question. What is one piece of advice that you would give somebody who is just starting out on their journey with EQ?
I'd say trust the process.
Okay.
Have faith. Don't try to do it on your own. Get a guide that you trust, and give it a sufficient amount of time.
Okay.
So that you can truly evaluate the impact of it. And if you can do that, I think you're going to be a lot better manager and leader. Yep. And I think one of the things that Ian said to me is, he said, my wife and kids one night over dinner said, the kids said to him, "Hey, Dad, something's just different about you. You're just kind of more fun these days. Like what? Are you doing something different?" And he says, that's when I knew. And he had been several weeks, probably a month and a half into it. He had said, that's when I realized that there was maybe there really was something to all of this kind of touchy-feely kind of stuff. So good news is there's really good science that says contributes to motivation, contributes to productivity, contributes to team development. Lots and lots of really good quantitative research that says this stuff is real. Don't push it aside. Don't push it aside like it's all woo-woo kind of stuff. It's really one of the best places anyone can make an investment. The thing is you're not going to get that cause and effect. It's correlational rather than causational. And if you can do that, people will appreciate it. And by the way, who knows? Maybe even your kids are going to tell you that you're a little bit more fun.
Yes, that's always the goal sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Working Progress. A big thank you to you, Dr. Kevin, for offering not just valuable insights, but those practical, action-driven strategies for using EQ to lead with impact to build stronger and more meaningful connections. If you found today's conversation valuable, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave us a review, or just share this episode with a colleague or fellow leader. Your support helps us continue bringing those impactful conversations to life. And if you're just beginning your emotional intelligence journey, remember, knowing yourself is only step one. Using that insight to grow, adapt, and lead is where the real work and progress happens. As always, thank you for listening. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep making progress. Take care.